Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Modern Sales Pros conversation. Today, we're going to be unpacking the State of Revenue Alignment survey that Modern Sales Pros did in partnership with the amazing team at SalesLoft. As folks are getting in and getting settled, please do take a second and fill out that survey. We're going to use that information a bit later on. And I'm really excited here to be joined by Alexandria Snow, or Snow, as she loves to be called. She's Senior Product Marketing Manager at SalesLoft, and this is actually her first time, even though we've worked with SalesLoft for like 6 years, this is Snow's first time on an MSP event. Snow, welcome.
Thank you. I want to know what took you so long, but it's a pleasure to be here.
It's you know, sometimes the best things take a little while to get there. But Snow, we have a little bit of a tradition for first-time guests on Modern Sales Pros. We love to learn a little bit more about you, and you're not just a badass that helped us, with this survey and did a lot of the heavy lifting on the analysis. You're a real person too. So we'd love to learn a little bit more about you and what you're up to outside of work. So any fun hobbies or skills or anything that you've picked up or maybe gotten better at since the start of the pandemic?
Absolutely. I would say probably the skill that I have improved the most upon since the pandemic has begun was I'm a DM, a dungeon master for Dungeons and Dragons 5e. And you can tell I love numbers and analysis, and that's part of the reason why I'm excited to be here today.
That's great. So are you dungeon mastering for like one group? Do you have a bunch that you're working with? Like, how's that?
So right now I'm leading 2 games. I'm leading one at SalesLoft, actually. So we have a group of lofters that like to come together and role play adventures. I have another group that I play with my partner and our friends. And then I play as a player in 2 other groups as well.
Oh, that's a whole hell of a lot. Is it all 5th edition, or is there any Pathfinder or 3.5 worked in there, or old school like me, advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition?
You know what? I'm not that good at math, and so I'm sticking to the 5e. I haven't gone to the older school versions, but I did try and play, I think, the 3rd edition when I was younger, and it was an event.
Yeah, the crunch increases significantly. At least to the 3.5 era, everything kind of made sense. In 2nd edition, it was like, of course, armor class goes down. Why wouldn't it? Like, what's wrong with you? I don't get that. We could spend a lot of time talking about that. Folks, do just take a second and fill out that sales org survey. That's going to help us really understand and frame up this programming just a little bit more here. And before we jump into that, I do want to let everybody know we're really excited to be working with SalesLoft. This is the first of many events in 2021 that we'll be doing. So do keep your eyes peeled on some of the interesting programming we've got, up to and including Jeremy Donovan live at April's Summit, where if you haven't had a chance to see Jeremy speak, it's phenomenal. Not quite as great as Snow, but he's still pretty dang good in his own right. But as I had mentioned at the outset, this is from a survey that Modern Sales Pros did in partnership with SalesLoft. For those of you who maybe aren't familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest community for revenue leaders. So we create an environment for folks that are in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales enablement, and the related supporting disciplines to come and answer questions they'd otherwise struggle to solve on their own. We do that through sponsored research, like what we're going to be talking about here today, through other amazing online programs where we bring on experts to answer questions or explain advanced topics, through our robust online forum, and hopefully in the not too distant future, through really great in-person events where you have an opportunity to network and meet other revenue leaders that are in your local community. We have about 6,000 different organizations, about 20,000 members and growing. And the great part about it is everything we do for our community is free. Everything's free for members. And everyone that's not a member who's on here today will be invited to join afterwards. But as I said at the beginning, this was a joint effort sponsored by the team at SalesLoft. So I'm going to hand it off to Snow to say a few words about SalesLoft and introduce herself. Snow?
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So let's get right down to business. So as it was said, I am Alexandria Snow. Everyone here, yes, you can please call me Snow. Don't think you have to say Alexandria, not even my husband. It commits to those 5 syllables, so Snow is fine. I've been at SalesLoft for about 2.5 years, and SalesLoft is our sales engagement solution that we brought to market. And really though, what's really getting me excited about this year, and really particularly in this topic of revenue and sales alignment, is we are in the process of building out a value engineering strategy that's going to take the way that our customers can leverage SalesLoft and take it to that next level, right? So often you buy technology and you're kind of left to your own devices on how you're going to adopt it. And we want to help our customers adopt SalesLoft and get everything to where they need to be so they can reach their goals.
That's an exciting milestone too. When you start to bring in value engineering, you're like, all right, we're doing some really amazing stuff here. And before we jump in, just a little context around the survey. When we were working with SalesLoft to come up with what should we be asking the community, what are common problems that the MSP community faces, sales and marketing alignment or revenue and marketing alignment came up constantly. It's a conversation that happens often in modern sales pros. It's a conversation that I know Snow and I have in our own groups outside of work, like what the hell are those yahoos doing? So we're excited to share some data today. We're not going through everything that's in the survey results. Everybody who's here today will share a copy with you afterwards, but think of this as a quick kind of Snow and my hot takes on what we found throughout the survey. So with that, Snow, you ready? You ready to hop in?
Let's dive in.
Oh, I'm so excited about this. So really, Snow, I'm gonna hand this off to you, but like, why is this important? Like marketing alignment, okay, cool. But like, why does this actually matter?
Well, there's real success metrics and real benefits to being aligned within the organization. So at SalesLoft, I feel like I'm an honorary sales member. Product marketing works really closely with our sales enablement team, and we benefit from that alignment. But let's look at it from an industry level, right? Because I'm just one person telling you that it helps out. So you can see, as part of our research, we looked out into the industry and said, what are some of the benefits of having alignment? When organizations feel like they are aligned between their sales and their marketing teams, what are they saying? They're saying higher win rates. I can say that word, win rates. They're seeing growth in marketing influenced revenue, which is a huge one. As we know, part of the reason why people struggle with this is marketing struggles to find what their influence actually is. And then you see that year-on-year growth, because it's not just about getting the win rates, it's also about making sure that you're continuing to grow your business even after the deal has been signed, right? We don't want to churn customers, we want to keep them happy. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add, Richard.
Yeah, and I think the important part too, back to the methodology, we didn't just approach, this wasn't just for sales and marketing alignment, right? There were folks that were in customer success roles, sales development roles, and your regular sort of sales leadership roles. Mm-hmm. And I think that last piece, we've hopefully all learned that throughout the pandemic, that your customers are your most important asset. I know it sounds strange. Well, we're customer first. The part that's interesting about having good alignment between your marketing and your revenue functions, driving that year-over-year growth, that's the metric that becomes more important when it's really hard to bring in new customers.
Right.
If you can grow your existing base, and you can't offset new logo growth, but if you can expand, that does give you a more engaged audience. And we'll talk about this a little bit more. But I think what's interesting, if you look at like HubSpot on the far end of the product-led growth motion, the only thing that they talk about is creating advocates. Yeah. HubSpot, the marketing company, they deploy a ton of marketing towards their customers, their existing customers, via customer success motion and otherwise. So that last part, like all across the world, you're starting to see an investment in that. So hopefully we can chat and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And then also for folks that are just tuning in, go ahead and use the Q&A panel for any questions that you have or anything that you want to know a little bit more about. Snow and I are here to help guide you through this quick preview of the survey. So here's why it's important. So what did we find out as we were going through this, Snow? Anything interesting? Are sales and marketing actually aligned?
I would love to say that, yes, times have changed. We've all solved this problem and everyone is now on the same page. But, we've uncovered a couple of interesting things. Richard, go ahead and let's see what we learned. Our sales, no, marketing and sales and the customer teams are still not aligned. It's still a problem that we're seeing. It's not, in my opinion, it's not as bad as it has been in the past. We are seeing improvement, but it's not something where the entire organization feels informed. So even when leaders feel like they're on the same page, you're seeing it break down the moment you get to the manager level, and even worse at the individual contributor level.
Yeah, there's a lot to this, and I think this was the confirmatory results, right, that we got from this survey. It's better, I think, than we thought it would be. So maybe that's a good thing, right? It's not as bad, or maybe we're cynical, but it is interesting. And as we'll dive into next, a little bit more of, well, what does sales think marketing should be doing, and so on. So
well,
and here's yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Rich, I do want to mention, like, we didn't just ask, right, the survey respondents, do you think that you're aligned? Because I find that if you do that, people will oversimplify in their response, right? So we asked a variety of questions to come to this conclusion. And I just want to level set on that, because otherwise you might have some people who are just like, no, I had a really bad. No.
I didn't like that one event that marketing put on. We're not aligned because it didn't have my favorite food.
Exactly.
I get that. I love it. Well, let's talk a little bit more about what we saw. And folks, the reason we asked you to share with this is we actually asked, and one of the interesting parts about this survey was understanding how team size impact that feeling of alignment. And I think at least what I found really surprising was you'd think a smaller team, if it's, if I'm the entire sales team and Snow's the entire marketing team, you'd think you'd be aligned. But was that the case, Snow?
No, we actually found that, as you can see here, the majority of our respondents said that their marketing team was size 1 to 5, right? So that's a really small marketing organization. And at the time when I first read that, and I first saw the responses coming in as we were getting it, I said, well, maybe the sales team just doesn't know how big their marketing team is. But when we looked at the other questions, it really seemed like, no, we were looking at organizations where marketing was not the big investment. It was these smaller teams. And from what we could tell, part of the reason why they were unable to get their finger on the pulse was just that they were overly inundated with questions and focusing on the wrong things.
Yeah, it was really, really surprising. I think that was one of the first, when we were going through the results. Now it was just like, but hold on, it's one person, or the marketing team is one person. How are you not aligned? Like, what the heck?
Because then you should be able to think, you just had that conversation with sales. I know what they've asked me. I did that thing, and now we're aligned, right?
Right.
But the interesting thing is, I feel like this comes a lot back to attribution. So we did a little bit of extra research, right? It's not just the survey. We wanted to go out and validate this out into the market. And so we looked into it, and there's a trend that we're seeing within marketers. So while marketing is pivoting to be more focused on attribution and understanding how they're influencing revenue, there's this pretty big gap, particularly around content. So what I'm saying here is, these are these metrics that you see over here. 43% of marketers who produce content are measuring their ROI. They've got something that they can measure, right? But of those, only about half are actually confident that attribution is real, right? I think there's this great quote that they always bring up in marketing, which is from the Ford company, which said, I know 50% of my marketing is working. I just don't know which 50%.
I love that. I haven't heard that one before. That's a great quote. So what is it? And again, I understand marketing attribution, and I'm sure that you do as well. At a really high level, what makes it so difficult for a marketer here? Bring us inside the marketer's mind. Why is attribution of content so freaking difficult?
Well, content is actually kind of the thing, and I'm glad that we're focusing there, because you got to imagine, you produce a lot of content, and a lot of times the only insight that you're going to have from your sales organization on what they need in the deal cycle is from conversations with them. And it seems like the loudest voices are always asking for kind of the same thing. There's this trope within marketing, and I actually hear in sales leadership, that everyone needs one sheet, right? We all need one sheet, or we all need a PDF. And so what happens is that marketing thinks that they're solving for that. They think that they're listening, and then they focus all of their time into this piece that isn't actually helping. And then in addition, once they hand it over to sales, they have no insight into, are they actually using that piece? Is it impacting the deal? It's like, yes, I sent it to them, but did this piece actually impact my buyer's perception? And that's where the breakdown really starts to happen.
That's a tricky one, and let's talk about that actually a little bit more. And so we asked sales leaders and folks, revenue leaders, right? What were the types of content, back on this content point, that were most impactful to the sales cycle? And I'll leave this up here for a second. We go into more detail on the report, but I think this is very interesting, and I think there's a lot to pull apart here.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I already kind of, led the witness there. I had an assumption on what this was going to be. And I'll go ahead and tell you, that was not the learning that we undertook. I don't know if we want to go ahead and tell them what our number one winner was.
I think we should. And I think it's funny because we're all on a webinar and we all love events. And that's the thing that sales leaders, when asked in our survey, or revenue leaders, I should say, webinar and events being the most, the most common and the most commonly asked for thing, which is interesting because it's almost the exact opposite of a one-sheeter, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's here. All the folks joining us today are here for some amount of time. They're dialed in, maybe they're doing some work, but like, you got to commit to this. As a seller, I got to drive you to it. Like, these are not easy for every party involved versus a one-sheeter. That was really surprising to me.
It's one of those to remind ourselves that maybe it's customer success that we had that 11% of our respondents were more from the customer org, and webinars can, historically, they're viewed as something that you can do to inform your customer base, right? So maybe that could be, but that was such a small group that doesn't account for all the sellers that selected webinars. And it was interesting at SalesLoft, our webinar mistress of all is Jennifer Cummings. She's on. Hello, she's amazing. When she saw this, she goes, "Oh yeah, I know why. Because sales loves leads, and the best leads come from events." I don't know how you feel about that, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two sides to this, right? The first side of it is, as a former enterprise sales leader, that is 100% true. The cost of those leads, if we were doing something owned and operated in my past life, were very, very, very expensive, because they know if you attend an owned and operated event as an attendee, you know that at some point in time, it's going to be a timeshare pitch. So that means the experience to get the leads that you want, not just anybody who'll show up for a nice dinner, increases, which is where partnerships like this come into play. We develop a good content program that excites the good people that are in MSP. And if they're interested, there's a great conversation to be had with SalesLoft. So we get vetting on the both sides. I think it's one for me also on this point, like content. There's a big gap between saying I need content as a sales leader and actually teaching people how to use content.
Yes.
It is a tool. It is not a crutch. I don't just one-pager you to death, Snow, if you mention a competitor. I don't need a one-sheeter every time something comes up. I think that's there's a trope there. This is interesting because it says, no, we want leads.
Yep.
But then the anecdotally, I want one sheets is, well, those are both really easy things for you to do as a seller. Hey, Snow, you're interested in new feature? Check out the webinar. Hey, Snow, you're interested in the new feature? Here's the one pager. The other things that we get kind of deeper into there are more maybe heavyweight content, right? A blog post, an article. That's something that, okay, you've got to read that. You've got to consume that. What's up, Kat?
We knew she would make
Oh, this is great. That's a Kat. The great part about that programming is it's tough. You actually have to like digest it, right? Versus a webinar, the attribution is maybe a little bit easier there too, where it's like, hey, did you attend? It's like binary, right? Like, yep, the person registered or no, they didn't.
Well, and there's a little bit more that you can get from there. So from a marketing perspective, it's actually a great asset, because you can also, some web conferencing providers will give you engagement metrics when people attended. Were they watching the whole thing? And that helps you kind of identify maybe what's the best content or talk track that's going to resonate with this person. And so again, if you can get that, if you understand that, and you can get that alignment, and you can get that information, especially back to the seller after their lead has attended an event, you can now continue that conversation. I always like to say the worst thing in sales is the handoffs, right? No one likes to call the credit card company and get transferred to the other guy and have the same conversation all over again. And so the more you can kind of like remove those silos, we'll talk about that a little bit later, right? Remove those silos and like build that connection between each stage and between the different teams. You're going to see benefits.
And I think too, and this is a little bit old school, right? We're talking maybe 5 or 7 years ago. Salesforce, the big CRM company that we all know, not SalesLoft, Salesforce, they make a big content push into videos. And this is an anecdotal number, but they're like 1 recorded webinar is worth like thousands of pages of content. Because as a marketer, and Snow can attest to this, you can take that webinar as well and you can cut it up into little bite-sized bits and put it up on LinkedIn and YouTube. And each one of those bite-sized bits has, maybe there's a tweet length takeaway and a longer article and a blog post. So it can be part of a content program. But I think that's actually pretty difficult if we go back to small marketing teams, right? Team of one, it's a lot of work.
It is. Producing video content is a lot of work. And for some reason, I find when you put video content into the marketer's purview, all of a sudden it needs that. I mean, we all know there's marketing speak, right? We all think of, when we think about marketers, we're like, make it look beautiful. But I find, especially in like the sales cycle, where right now, where we're all remote and you're just hoping to like build that connection with a person, it's kind of better to have a rough cut of the seller explaining something than some really shiny marketing video.
Well, I think the other part too on that is marketers, they also drink their own champagne, and sometimes they lose a little bit of, in product management, what we would call user empathy. Not to take anything away from all the amazing marketers, but sometimes you do fall in love with your own language.
Yes.
And that's not necessarily the language that your prospect will use. And that's a perspective that a seller, even though they want to point their finger at marketing, that is one where sellers can oftentimes be more impactful, speak that language and understand, versus like what Snow was saying with some of the marketing speak.
But if you can build that connection between the two, so that maybe you have that marketing video that maybe that's on the website, and then empower your team to know what you're talking about in that content so that they can build their own related translations, if you will, it just makes such a better experience.
And I think this is where, and tools like SalesLoft have a lot in this, where you can start to see what's resonating from a messaging perspective and prospecting communications. You can hear what's resonating from a call recording standpoint. So there's a lot of technology that can make that. Snow doesn't just have to go hang out with the SDRs and hear what's being said on discovery calls, right? She can listen to the recordings, ex post facto and get a playlist together and be like, oh, wow, that's actually really good language. We should adjust accordingly. Back to this kind of alignment and making video content really engaging.
We'll also just talk about how that makes the sales team feel, right? Because now the marketing team is showing that they're listening to their sales team. So when they send out this content, they can even say, oh, we noticed this by going and reviewing your calls. And it builds that connection too, because oftentimes marketing and sales will feel like, the right hand's doing one thing and the left hand's doing a completely different thing. You need to be on the same page.
And yeah, using the same language, being in the trenches together certainly avoids the this.
Yeah.
And what Snow is talking about there too, which we've heard from what we've heard in the past from Sean Fowler from SalesLoft as well, is what we're talking about there is really selling sales on using the resources that are available to them. Because if you ask a salesperson and you're not thinking about how you're going to enable them to use that content, you're gonna struggle to see value from it, attribution from it, and the salesperson's probably gonna come back to you in a week and say, well, so now that white paper, or that one pager didn't work. I need a new battle card for X, Y, and Z competitor.
Yeah. Or if your marketing team is producing elevator pitches that they're expecting the sales team to memorize, you might have a little bit of a problem.
Yeah. I dig it. Well, let's talk about this a little bit. So this is a fun one. We're going to pop this up for a few minutes here. So we actually asked sales and revenue leaders what they wanted, and this was a free form question, what they wanted or what they would wish marketing would do more of. Mm-hmm. And this is the word cloud.
Yeah. Spoiler, no one pagers. I still thought there would be more, right? No, it was incredibly interesting. It was interesting because you see content was just the biggest ask overall. And so again, to a certain extent, that it was that generic, that we just need more content, and not even to what extent, shows that maybe this is about showing them that you have something and getting them to adopt it. Again, going back to Sean Fowler, right? Encouraging them into the process so that they feel like the content is well informed.
I think the other part here too, that, I mean, there's a bunch, and each one of these is kind of interesting, but like demand generation, like really, really broad. And again, I want to be clear for folks, this was free form. This wasn't like picked from a list. This was completely free form. So just blanket demand gen, like it's such a basic thing, especially of your early stage marketing team. That's all that your early stage marketing team is doing, is growth in demand gen activities. They're not doing brand marketing. Oh, yeah. They're not doing partnership marketing. They're literally only focused on filling the pipeline.
Well, and you look at this too, like the fact that real marketing, it's not the biggest thing here, but the fact that enough people said it, that it's one of those middle, enough people said it, that that's a pretty consistent trend, that our sales and revenue leaders are coming back and saying, all I need my marketing team to do is actually do marketing. So your marketing team probably feels like they're doing real marketing. So there's definitely a misalignment if that's the result.
The other one that's interesting on here, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but this notion of like integrated systems. Mm-hmm. And this is one that's funny, and I've experienced this having been in sales engineering, and like Snow was saying, right, crashes happen at the intersections. As a sales engineer, right, when you're chatting with an engineer, it's fine. As soon as the salesperson gets involved, or as soon as the business person on the prospect side gets involved, it's all hell breaks loose, right? It's chaos. But that alignment oftentimes now is also at a systems level, where you've got your marketing system of record, HubSpot, Pardot, whatever it might be. You've got your sales CRM, Salesforce. You've got your sales engagement tool, SalesLoft. And those systems have a lot of information in it, but really having that data be integrated is super, super important. Because if it's not, and Snow, we were talking about this in the prep, right? If you have bad data, or marketing is only working with half of the information, or sales only, you're making bad targeting decisions. You're making bad ad buys. You're having maybe even bringing on customers that are bad fits. Those bad fit customers are then coming on, and they're going to take a ton you're going to take a ton of calories to keep, and they're going to have a higher likelihood to churn, all because the systems themselves aren't integrated here.
And it's so interesting because you'll notice not only do we have integrated systems, but segmentation made it on the list as well. And you're right. Part of the reason why the segmentation is struggling is because, or is likely because, of these segmented systems where everyone's keeping their data kind of in their own little silo, and it's not getting spread out, and it's not informing other things. I would say even buyer personas is related to that, because if marketing is working from a different data set than what sales is, then sales is not going to trust marketing's buyer personas.
Well, and I think it's something too, where when we had Eric Martin on late last year talking about how SalesLoft built. So Eric Martin is the VP of Demand Gen at SalesLoft.
Yes, SVP of Demand.
SVP of Demand Gen. I should have given that context before. We had Eric Martin on chatting about how SalesLoft built out their account-based marketing practices, and it was not a quick, like, we're going to go do ABM, and then next week there was ABM. It was a long process. Mm-hmm. But it was also, and so correct me if I'm wrong, it's an ongoing refinement.
It is. It's an ongoing refinement that requires many different inputs from marketing and sales. So like if I just look at it from a marketing perspective, Eric manages the account base with the demand gen organization. But to inform that, product marketing works with sales to build out, again, our buyer personas. And then we sit that on top of and partner it with the segmentation. And then we need to know where in the deal cycle we want to surround the account, because an account-based strategy is not just a marketing strategy. Like, we often go to account-based marketing, but it can have value and really help your AEs close more deals by giving them that surround. And you constantly have to go back and look at it. It's actually funny. Again, at SalesLoft, we feel like we've got great revenue and sales alignment, but just like account-based is an iterative approach, so is just having the alignment. We're working on a project. We just uncovered an area where marketing was operating under one understanding, sales was operating under another. We've got halfway through the project, and now we have to pump brakes. No one likes to do that.
It's one of those ones where it's Benjamin Franklin, don't fail. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail.
Yes.
That's why he's
plan to fail.
That's what it is. That's why he's the founding father, and I'm here with Snow today.
No, you did better than me. I was like, are you a carpenter? You gotta measure twice and cut once. That was mine.
I like that. I think that works too. We'll just throw all the analogies out there and talk in platitudes. I think the part on this that's really interesting, though, when you think about if you're listening to this, you're watching us, and you're like, okay, cool. ABM, I'm a sales leader, and I'm feeling like that's something maybe we should do. It's a buzzword that I'm hearing about. We'll share the long conversation with Eric, because what SalesLoft has done is very impressive in that space as an organization. But I think also that does start to really get everybody singing from the same sheet of music, right? What's our ideal customer profile? What's our personas? What are we going to do to try to get those? Does it make sense economically for us to do it, right? Can we actually scale the business the way that we need to around it? Or is it something where, we're not going to take everybody out to $1,000 steak dinners for a $250 a year purchase. That's silly, right? But there's a world where you start to game plan those strategies because you're aligned, because you've got that same sheet of music, as it were, that same data. It's everything's integrated and all that. Let's talk a little bit more about kind of some of the hot takes that we had from this, because I think we've talked a fair amount about the data, but kind of one team, one dream was the macro that both Snow and I, when we were now, this is kind of, we came up with that independently. It was like, yeah, let's do this. You've heard us say it a bunch of times, but Snow, why don't you talk a little bit more about the ABM piece here? I think that we've hit on it a little bit, but a little bit more.
Yeah, because it really, if we're talking about revenue, we're all here to talk about revenue alignment, right? Alignment between sales, marketing, and the customer team. And so I think we've all been the ones where we've identified, yeah, it's a problem. How do we address that problem? And I think account base is one of the clear wins here, because it does force a certain amount of rigor. It forces your sales and your marketing person to talk about it, to do it right. If they're not even just coming to the table to talk about it, you're not ever going to get it off the ground. And so it's just a great way, and it's such a set strategy. There's great documentation out there. I know we just mentioned Eric has a webinar that he's partnered with you guys for a series talking about account base. And it really just helps ensure that the entire organization is functioning from the same data set. And if you're not, it will uncover those pains in a way that you can address, right? Because you have to have that insight.
Yeah, and I think to underpin that is the second point, right? RevOps is the emergent term, right? Past couple of years, we're hearing more and more folks going, oh, it's not sales ops, it's revenue operations.
Right.
You can't make alignment happen as to its optimum, right? You can't do it unless you have connective tissue between the groups. Yeah. That connective tissue is your data pipeline. That is making sure that an opportunity is an opportunity is an opportunity. A lead is used the same way everywhere. A contact is used the same way everywhere. Activities are tracked the same way everywhere. Mm-hmm. That single source of data today is powered by a RevOps machine, right? Whether that's one person that's supporting sales and marketing and customer success and sales development, sales engineering, or it's an entire organization. That's critical, because without that, you have multiple different teams with multiple different tech stacks, achieving multiple different goals with multiple, even if you have an ABM strategy and it goes, okay, cool, well, we're going to talk to product managers at Unilever. What does that mean? What's the right data set for truth on that? If we're using one enrichment tool in sales and customer success is using another, or SDR is using another, or marketing is using another, like we're already missing one.
Yeah, exactly. And ABM, like we said, right, that's just going to give you the space to kind of identify that. It's going to help you prioritize and understand where you need to put your resources and focus. Then you're going to identify, all right, we need to make sure we have better data. Once you get this RevOps, the break down the barriers between your data, integrate it, and perhaps also in a perfect world, get a revenue ops function from a strategic perspective. I know, big dreams. You want to go back to that account-based process and update it. Because again, it's a living, breathing thing. And then really, I would say, then you go to the next level, which is, can you as an organization restructure yourself so that you're either leading with product or customer first, right? Because this is going to help give you that North Star that's going to ensure that you are all rowing in the same direction at the same time. And it depends on the kind of organization you're in, whether a customer first or a product-led growth is going to function. But I don't really think they have to be one or the other. I think you actually can kind of do both as long as you prioritize one, right? What are your thoughts?
No, I think it's right. And I think you have to, it's just iterative and ongoing, right? And if your account-based strategy outpaces your tools too much, you're gonna, that gap will expose itself in some unnatural way. If you're, and I would say that's not usually the problem. The problem's usually the other way, where you're over-tooled and over-dated because customer success bought Gainsight or Tatango or Catalyst or whatever, and then marketing's got HubSpot. Sales has got SalesLoft and Salesforce, and then everything's going into like a data warehouse somewhere, and it's just like, what mere mortal can start to solve some of these problems? So I would say that but the focus part is important here. You really do, when you think about your strategy, tooling is an important part of that, right? Go back to your big three consulting model, people, process, technology. Today, I think sales tech especially, there's a new tool, that problem that you have, Snow, there's a tool that 65% solves it. You can buy it right now. Swipe your credit card and go.
Oh yeah.
And
if y'all think the sales tech landscape is crazy, combine it with the mark tech landscape, and oh my gosh, you're going to have so many technical solutions that are probably doing halfway the same thing.
Right. And you fall into the idea of, right, you've got those organizational silos. So really what my recommendation is on a lot of this, no one on the call is starting from scratch, right? Unfortunately, there's no one here who's like, a blank slate. Process matters so much more than everything else here. Unless you've got a process in place that's functional, I don't want to say working, I don't even want to say optimized, to update sort of ABM processes. You can't throw a tool at that. That's all you're doing is optimizing a broken process, and you're wasting a ton of money along it. Same thing on, same thing on marketing tools, right? You hear intent. We need an intent provider. We need to use intent data. It's like, well, maybe that's the right solution for you, but work backwards from what you're trying to solve for. Who are you targeting? How are you going to actually use that data when it gets to an SDR in SalesLoft and they're running a cadence or a sequence against that? Didn't thought of that. Well, maybe you shouldn't spend $70, $80, $90, $100,000 on intent until you figure out how you're going to use it. And I do think though that like the account based, if I could be a little bit cheeky, that's almost like group therapy for sales and marketing. And most importantly, your founders. They think that the product is this and the customer is this, but that really brings it down and forces everybody to kind of sign up for something. And it is it's not a painful process. That's not the right word for it. It can be a time-consuming process, but it's one of those ones that's worth getting right.
It requires so much, like I agree, it's not painful. It actually is wonderful once you get it off the ground, but it takes that extra bit of due diligence at the front end that people can get impatient with and they kind of want to rush through it. But it's that critical that you talk about it. Just like you were saying earlier, you don't want to just make the fast decision to buy tech. Adjust the process and look at the process first. Audit the tech that you already have and see what you already have before you start adding new stuff.
But Snow, it's so freaking fun to buy technology. It's the best. You just swipe your credit card and then you get some new widgets.
I mean, we do love retail therapy. I'm not going to lie.
It's not the worst. So we got a bunch of questions in here, folks. We've got Snow for another about 10, 15 minutes or so. So we're going to pop over and answer a couple questions here, and I'm going to stop. Hold on, how do I do this? It's only my 985th Zoom webinar. There we go. So a couple questions coming in from Michael in Boston. I want your perspective on this, and then I'll share mine. White papers, fool's gold. Is that fool's gold for marketers? Is it fool's gold for sales? What do you think, Snow?
It's actually funny. I think it depends on the white paper. So I'm in product marketing. I think that there are big benefits for particular audiences when you're using a white paper, or even when you just use that process, where I think it is fool's gold if all you're producing is a white paper. So white paper in thing, it shouldn't be that. It should be associated with a larger content pillar or other activity, right? So for example, I'll use an example that we have. So, we sell tech, surprise, surprise. And oftentimes one of the buyers in our buying cycle that's underserved is the IT buyer. But the IT buyer does not want to look at some fancy ebook deck with they want to look at a technically written document. And the way a marketer can do that, the best way a marketer can support that is through a white paper.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Snow. And I think for more technical audiences, and let me know if you disagree with more technical audiences, security, engineering, IT, compliance, just the facts, man. Put them in the white paper, and away we go. Especially my past life, I sold MarTech, and the General Data Privacy Regulation, California Consumer Privacy Act, those sorts of things. It's you don't really need or want to have too much marketing fluff around that. You want to be, hey, this is how we handle a data subject access request, and here's how we handle a right to delete, and here's how we handle each one of those pieces. In that world, absolutely. When we were selling to CMOs, it was a lot of really high gloss content.
It's funny, I actually think the best kind of content for a CMO is going to be a one-page. Something that they can take in very, very quickly. And that's because of the visual nature that's pretty common among the CMO group.
I think that it's one of those ones where the answer, though, back to the question of like white papers, it depends a lot on the audience. More technical audiences,
Yes.
white papers, technical documentation, probably not marketing collateral, or fluffy, well-produced, high design marketing collateral.
Yeah, if someone's producing a white paper, it probably should be someone in the marketing team. It probably should be someone that's more in the product marketing organization as opposed to your comms group, because it's also a different way of writing, right? You want it to feel less fluffy, really to the point, and you want to work with the technical writers. If you have access to technical writers, leveraging them to kind of review it and make sure that it doesn't beat around the bush too much.
Right. And there's ways to, and this is almost a separate conversation, but as a sales engineer or a technical salesperson, there's ways to use that as a selling tool,
Yes.
even though it is a very factual document, but it's still not, if it's too high produced, and we actually experienced this, very, very high investment in brand marketing in my previous organization. So everything we produced felt very, very high quality.
Mm-hmm.
That can go too far, even with a white paper for a technical audience, where like it just feels like everything you're saying is factually accurate, but something here just feels off because it is so high quality.
And there's also the one thing is, if you're going to do a white paper, again, I think the big question is first ask yourself, who's the audience and what's the purpose of this content, and determine if it is a technical audience and if it's an inform. If it's a deep inform or a guide, that's a good reference to determine if you're going to write a white paper. But the other component is, if that person is an IT person, you want to know who you want the person who's writing it to know what the standard technical writing document looks like. Right. So my husband's an IT security admin, and I tell you, he complains about poorly formatted docs all the time.
It's true. It's a way to show that you know the lingo. So we've got actually a question here, Snow, in chat. I think this is a great one. So somebody is actually starting from scratch. Huh. So where any recommendations, I think, on where to start and how to make sure that folks get sales and marketing alignment set up. Set up off the bat. That one got stuck in the throat.
So I have so many opinions, and the fact that you're starting with a clean slate just makes my heart just a little warm. But it's also, I know it can be very scary looking at the blank page. When I went to art school, I have what's called white page syndrome, where I can't start the art without making just a random mark on it because I worry about it too much. So the first thing is just to kind of take that first step and identify what you want your first step to be. And sometimes it can be rather small. I find that if you have the ability to look into what a revenue operations strategy looks like, and you have the buy-in from your leadership, that's probably where you want to start. See how you can format your revenue leadership team so that you are all on the same page early on. And they're not all the same, right, Richard? I know we've talked about this before. That doesn't mean that you have to have one revenue CRO leader and everyone reports up to them. You can still have the different leaders, which are more traditional, but it's about the community and the weight each one of those people have to the decision. So marketing isn't making decisions in a vacuum. They are making it in tandem with the customer and sales organizations.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that was going to be, I can't say it any better than that. The revenue, starting with revenue ops, I think 5 years ago, that would have been a really, really hot take. Mm-hmm. Now it's like the sales stack is going to end up with 17 to 24 tools.
Yeah.
There are way more competitors to any solution out there, whether it's an adjacent tool starting to push into the space. Just go on G2 Crowd and look up any category, and you're like, hold on, I didn't realize that tool competed with this tool. And while they have a feature that kind of sort of does that, so you can really easily get into tooling trouble. You can really easily get into data silo trouble if you don't start with that in mind. And I think the other thing too, just on this, we'll share, I think Eric Martin's conversation that we had that we've mentioned a few times here has some good takes on really going through the exercise of defining your ideal customer profile in a way that you can actually do something with, depending on stage of company and all of that.
I would agree. It's like, first get the strategy, identify who your buyer is and who that ideal profile is, before you maybe even start answering the question of like, how are we going to approach them and what tools that we need? Like, tools should be much lower on the list. Otherwise, you're totally going to end up with a tech stack that's
Frankenstein. Process, people, technology is probably the right way to think about this.
Yeah.
So a couple more questions in here. This is an opinion piece. I actually have a really strong opinion on this. So top salespeople, right? Are they successful because they're following what marketing is saying, or are they successful because they're not following what marketing is saying?
Ooh, man.
Great question. I told you, Snow, we put you on the spot with some of these.
You're coming in hard. I would actually argue that it's not because they're doing what marketing says, nor is it that they're ignoring. It's that they are aware of what marketing is doing and they're coming to the table with marketing. So I'll use a couple of specific examples. One of our top sellers at SalesLoft, she's been with us for a long time, and she knows that marketing knows she's one of the better providers. And so we are sellers. So we actively reach out to her to pilot things. What do you think about this? What do you think about this talk track, this deck? If we brought this, how would, and we get her feedback. And the moment she does that, she's more likely then to follow through with that and then give us feedback, because if she can't make it work, we know we're wrong, right? And then if she's bought in and she starts succeeding, all the rest of the team gets really excited. So when we finally enable the rest of the team, they're ready to take it on.
I love it. I think that's a great answer. The other thing I would say is sales, like many disciplines, I think we can oftentimes mistake a unicorn for somebody that's just incredibly lucky.
Yeah.
And there's going to be people that you don't need to do anything for. They roll right off the assembly line, roll out of bed, and they can sell SalesLoft with the best of them, or whatever with the best of them. What do you do to the goose laying the golden egg? You try not to get in the way. Just let it happen. Right now, the challenge is most of us want to aspire to be the goose. Most of your top sellers think they're the golden goose, and in reality, they're just incredibly lucky.
Yeah.
And being able to decide between those two things is really important. And I would also take what Snow is saying one step further. For your top, I don't know, 3-5%, your elite sellers, just give them what they need, right? They're gonna use it effectively. But you're really thinking about everything we've talked about today is really about moving your B plus.
Yeah.
If you can get those folks to if you can take a C plus seller or CSM and make them an A minus, because you've got this really strong alignment, that's great, because the unicorns are going to happen and they're going to do their own thing. Now we can spend a lot of time optimizing that, or we can say, hey, let's move this big chunk in the middle, because that's going to help us a ton as a business.
Yeah, it's about when you have those really top performers identifying, and it's funny because you brought that up. I kind of had a flashback to the challengership sale. Like, what kind of seller are they? Because certain sellers are really they're great. It's a great opportunity for marketing to lean in them. Like, again, if you think about the example that I gave earlier, but others are not. Others are going to inundate you with questions, or you're going to derail them from the process that works, right? This is actually, we sell a sales tool to salespeople. This is one of the challenges we have to overcome, is like, when we're selling into an organization, how do you help keep their A players continuing to perform at that level while leveling everybody else up?
Totally. And that's the allure, back to what we were saying before. Like, that's the allure of so much sales tech, right? And MarTech. Like, you mean I can make my C's A minuses? That's all I have to do is buy all of this stuff? Oh, why didn't you just say that stuff?
It's so interesting, because it goes right back to what I said earlier about value engineering, right? It's not even now about selling the platform. You really know you're doing it right if you're not just buying tech. You're buying into the strategy because it supports your process. You have your process, you have your concept, you know what you're trying to accomplish, and the tech is just something that helps you get there, but you've already nailed the process.
Oh, I dig it. And I think there's a lot here. There's a lot that we've covered. But Snow, this has been a lot of fun. Before we wrap up here, just a couple things. First and foremost, everybody, we're going to send out the results of the survey afterwards. We'll also send out this recording. If you're like, I don't want to read, I want to relive the amazingness of that conversation. That the recording will be made available with some key takeaways. But Snow, before we go, one last thought from you. And we hit on this a little bit, but how do we drive sales and marketing alignment, or revenue and marketing alignment? What's one thing that you would say to everybody, like, do this, start here, get going with this?
Oh goodness, if you'd asked me this last week, I would probably have a different answer. But again, we're going through this now where we've identified the problem, and I would say radical candor. A lot of the feedback I got from this survey was not pulling a lot of punches, and your marketing team needs to know how your sellers are feeling. They need to know that they think they're doing what you want them to do by turning out one-pagers and building decks, and it's not working. You need to come to the table with them and let them know. And it might feel like it's going to be a really hard conversation, but they will thank you for it.
I think that's phenomenal advice. Snow, this has been the first time we've had you on. You're welcome back whenever you want. We'll hopefully get you back again soon. But on behalf of everybody behind the scenes at the team at MSP, all the folks in the community reading the survey, watching this after the fact, I know you're incredibly busy. Thank you so much for sharing some time and some insight. This was a lot of fun, Snow. Thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate it. I thank you for the opportunity. My cats, thank you for the opportunity to be on the call. SalesLoft is always excited to be able to partner with MSP. And do you mind if I give my my preferred sign off? All right.
Please.
MSP, may you all live long and prosper.
That's the last, I think that's the first time that we've closed with a personalized sign off. And with that, Snow, stay safe with the cats, and thank you again, and we'll talk soon. Take care, everybody.